Okay, I guess I'll use my phone. You've been having a good day? Yeah, so I want to switch back to OBS so we can do the hold screen and stuff like that. I'm just going to get rid of the ticker. It'll be like effectively the same as this.
Yeah, I'm down for that. What do you mean use the whole screen?
Like, so when we go live, it's not just us on camera.
Oh, they mean yeah. They're like looking down at our phones while people stream into and fall into the stream.
Exactly.
Speaking of hello viewers, we are going to be talking about MicroCHADegy turning themselves into a gigantic meme. We're also going to talk about the StableACT, and we are also going to talk about some ETH2 related stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be an action-packed day.
Yeah, should we get into it?
Yeah, why not? You want to just start us off?
Yeah, sure. I'll turn on my light. Oh, that's too bright. Too much light. Okay, here we go. Welcome, everyone, to POV Crypto, the only podcast that both Bitcoiners and Ethereans listen to. I'm David Hoffman, here with my buddy Christian. Christian, how you doing?
Doing good, man. I'm really glad that I ran the shit out of MicroCHADegy and everyone else that's gonna FOMO into Bitcoin in the next coming months.
Dude, MicroCHADegy. So, like, what's the deal? What's their deal? Like, how intentional? Hazu's take was that they are just going full yeet on it, and they are just going to put so much Bitcoin on the balance sheet that the whole entire company just turns into a backdoor ETF. Like, is that what? Or are they just really?
It's extremely expensive. It's extremely expensive of an ETF.
Why? Because
the price to Bitcoin exposure is,
I guess so.
It's like 6x. You're paying 6x as much for exposure to Bitcoin if you're buying MSTR to do it.
Okay, so for listeners that don't know, MicroCHADegy first, you're gonna have to sharpen me up on the numbers. They first bought like $250 million worth of Bitcoin.
$450 million at
that was their first purchase.
Yes.
Okay.
With their entire cash balance.
Right. Wow. Their entire cash balance. Holy shit. Okay. So they bought.
They've made 3 more purchases.
Right.
Which the last one was last week, and today they just announced that they are going to be offering up $400 million of debt, effectively convertible notes, and they plan to use all the funds raised to buy Bitcoin.
Right. Okay. So this is the fourth instance they've had of purchasing Bitcoin. But this is the first instance that they are not just like taking their balance sheet and buying more Bitcoin. They are actually issuing debt to buy more Bitcoin. And then that debt is going to be convertible into shares of the company is my understanding of how this works. Right. So they are just loading up on Bitcoin. They're just putting as much Bitcoin as possible on the balance sheets. And so, like, why this is interesting to me, like, first off, the main reason why this is interesting is, like, at the very least, there's $400 million going into purchasing Bitcoin over the next, I don't know, quarter. I don't know how long this takes. I don't know how much $400 million is to, like, add in as a buyer, but I feel like that's a big number.
Yeah, it's a big number. I mean, that's equivalent to what their initial purchase was, effectively, except that Bitcoin's twice as expensive at this point. Some things to know about Michael Saylor. So Michael Saylor and our good friend Greg Zuckerman knows Michael Saylor very well because Michael Saylor is a legend in the domain industry. So he's a legend in the domain industry. And then when the kind of mobile revolution was starting, he wrote a book called The Mobile Wave. And he, foresaw, iPhones and, mobile computing taking over the world. And here he is now, got domains right, got mobile right, loading up on Bitcoin. So he seems to have quite the track record of picking network effects.
Yeah, I would agree with that take. He definitely comes off as a Bitcoiner too, like culturally and his disposition is very much a Bitcoiner. Like he fits right in. In.
When he first kind of like came out, there was some altcoiners and naysayers saying like, "Oh, he's just here to dump on you later on." But everything he said since then has depicted the opposite reality. So he does feel like, for the most part, like a Bitcoiner. Although we're going to talk about the StableACT. He has said some things that
Yes.
hardcore Bitcoiners find controversial in the last few weeks as well. So
Mhm.
I don't think it's completely peachy
Right.
between the man Michael Saylor and the Cyber Hornets.
He hasn't become completely indoctrinated yet. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, he essentially, his message that some Bitcoiners hated was that,
Right.
hey,
Well, let's get into that later. Let's
yeah.
get into that later. Let's finish up the MicroCHADegy. Okay, so this time it's different though because they're issuing debt, and so
Yeah.
like you said that it's probably a bad strategy to purchase the MicroCHADegy if you want exposure to Bitcoin because like the ratio of shares to Bitcoin is just not there. Yet this seems to be what's the end? Why is MicroCHADegy doing this? Like, what is the end goal?
Well,
why are they issuing debt to purchase Bitcoin? What is the point of this? Is this to speculate on Bitcoin?
no, I mean,
is the company speculating on Bitcoin?
You could say they're speculating on Bitcoin, but publicly what they have said is that they have taken they have made Bitcoin the reserve asset. They're denominating their holdings into reserves. And this is effectively the first speculative attack from a corporate on the US dollar. So taking out debt to buy more Bitcoin is the idea behind the speculative attack. It's something that Pierre Richard has really put out some good thought leadership on. And it's just very interesting. Like, I think a lot of individuals, maybe even hedge funds, have been taking out debt to buy Bitcoin, but this is the first time a public company has to announce, hey, we're issuing this kind of debt on the company in order to raise funds to buy more Bitcoin. And I think that Michael Saylor is extremely bullish on Bitcoin. He thinks it's the future of money, and he's going to position his company as he sees fit.
So it's an entire, maybe not entirely, but like the motivations for this are probably largely influenced by the thought that the money printer is about to go burr over the next month. And so Michael Saylor's like, well, let's take all the Bitcoin we can get now because in the future there's going to be a lot more cash. So maybe he's, but now he's on leverage, right? Now he's on leverage.
Yeah. Well, the company is on leverage. I mean, it's not even leverage. They're just issuing convertible notes. So,
right.
I mean,
so like he's doing the same thing that the Federal Reserve is doing with his company equity. He's making the MicroCHADegy equity printer go burr to load up on Bitcoin on the balance sheet. That's like another interesting because there's two printing going on right now. There's the dollar printing, which is motivating this in the first place. But then MicroCHADegy is able to print shares in their company to load up on Bitcoin. Like, that's also interesting.
Just kind of like shitcoiners print their shitcoins to load up on Bitcoin too.
That's exactly right.
It's a tried and true strategy.
Yeah. Let's print all the things that we can print so we can buy the thing that we can't print. Like, there's a story there.
I think it's the story of the 20s.
Yeah.
So, or I guess what is this? Is this the 30s now? I don't know how to.
No,
this is the 20s. This is the 20s.
No, we're technically still in the 2010s.
Yeah. Okay.
If that's the line you're
pulling. The 10s this is the end of the 10s.
Yeah. 20. Sure. There's going to be a lot of printing in the 20s. That's for sure. Okay. Should we get into what Michael Saylor said about compliance with the state?
I mean, he didn't even make a super strong statement, in my opinion. From what I can tell is, he's just saying that, we're going to have to work with the powers that be for the time being. And I mean, that obviously doesn't make every Bitcoiner super happy. There's a lot of Bitcoiners that have not nuanced takes on that. I don't really know. Michael is clearly a visionary and a boss and has a ton of capital that he's willing to buy Bitcoin with. So I think he's ultimately good for Bitcoin, but he's also a newbie, in my opinion. He's still new to Bitcoin. He hasn't gone through the craziness that is about to unfold, and he hasn't gone through the bear market yet. So, there's just a lot to learn, and we'll see if his opinion changes over time.
Okay, so do you happen to have the tweet in front of you by chance? No. Okay.
Not really.
So what the conversation going on right now is like, how much does Bitcoin need to respond to like regulatory constraints, or does it at all? And like what Michael Saylor said, and what Raoul Pal has said, and what like a number of the new entrants into the space, what they're saying is like, you know, to some degree, Bitcoin is going to have to comply with state regulations, like at somehow, like, and obviously like the state is not going to change up like Bitcoin Core, right? Or issue like new node updates. That's not what we're talking about. What we are talking about are like entities like Coinbase, derivatives exchanges, blah, blah, blah. Some of the way that the Bitcoin network is expressed is going to be mediated by the state. And this is kind of where I think some Bitcoiners that argue against this perception are kind of like naive, because like there's no way that like to say that Bitcoin isn't going to be regulated by the state is to basically say that there is no state, right? And that's not true. There is a state that does have interests in making and then controlling the way certain assets are expressed inside of their realm of control. Like we all love our non-sovereign protocols. You guys, we all love Bitcoin. We all love Ethereum. And these are all non-state, like separate entities. But when it comes to the matter of what you do as a hunk of meat in physical space, what you do in your country is relevant to your country. And so your relationship with the protocol is somewhat mediated by the state, right? And so some people are like, well, yeah, well, fuck it, I'm not listening to the state. And other people, very public people like Michael Saylor that have a lot to lose, are like, sure, we're totally going to comply with the state. Why wouldn't we? Right. And this is the debate being talked about with Michael Saylor and the Cyber Hornets, but also with the StableACT, right? And this is the conversation on the Ethereum side of things right now with the StableACT. And the StableACT is basically asking people to like not asking Ethereum node operators, or telling Ethereum node operators that they have like a responsibility to not process any transactions that are illegal, right? And so like this boils down to like state approved like client updates for your Ethereum node, which is fucking ridiculous, right? And so like, and that's also why, and I think the point that I want to make about Bitcoiners that give resistance to people like Michael Saylor when they say that Bitcoin is going to have to integrate with the state is like, sure, we all love our non-state money, but that doesn't stop us from donating to institutions or entities like Coin Center, which are fighting the regulatory fight. Like if Bitcoin is going to be perfectly like immune from state control, like why even have Coin Center then? Like why do we even need them? Like no, like we need Coin Center. There is a meeting point between these two ecosystems, and where that point is can be moved left and right. And if we put effort into it, like we can fight the battle in our favor. So like I think like nodding your like hand waving away people that criticize Saylor and Raoul Pal for like not talk or for talking about how the state and Bitcoin are going to integrate, I think that's pretty naive.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you presented a relatively nuanced take, and most of the people that are pretty upset about it, they either believe that the right take is never waver, or it is not nuanced. Right. So I mean, I don't know what to say. Generally speaking, I think that Pierre Richard has had really great responses to the StableACT as well as other things, but it's like this shows we need to take an offensive. The best defense is an offense, and we need to, you know, make sure that mining is tax-free and make sure that all these things, you know, that are necessary for these ecosystems to thrive are in place. And to be honest, like it is hilarious to see Bitcoiners like get all peeved at Michael Saylor when he's saying like, hey, you know, we can take over within the system. Effectively, that's what he's saying. And then on the flip side, just seeing him the very next, you know, business day demonstrate how you can take over within the system. It's perfectly legal to issue stocks again, you know, that are denominated in USD and buy Bitcoin with it. You, as long as you say that's what you're going to do as a public company, it is perfectly legal to do that. So, I mean, the way I see it is the open source revolution is just infinitely and permissionlessly iterating, and the regulators, you know, they're going to try to get in front of it, but ultimately they will not be able to. They will fail. And I think this is a great example of Bitcoin fixes this by breaking it. And I mean, ultimately, that's what's going to happen. So, I mean, Bitcoin fits into this model, Ethereum fits into this model, all that kind of stuff, you know, fit into this model. And I mean, the government is just not competent enough to to take it all down.
I think the way that Michael Saylor is like quote unquote attacking the whatever legacy system, the regulatory system by selling dollars and buying Bitcoin is playing to Bitcoin's strength as an entity, as an institution, right? Because like we can either win. We can win against the state regulators in favor of Bitcoin and Ethereum by either going toe to toe with them and just like, citizens like not complying with laws, not complying with taxes, not complying, right? Like straight up, you versus me. Or there's like the parasite model, or like the parasite model, which I think is much more relevant to and much more resonant with how these systems work, where, instead of battling these institutions, we infiltrate them from the inside out and consume them from the inside out, right? And so like Bitcoin, all the politicians of the United States like buy Bitcoin and start like making pro-Bitcoin regulation, right? Same thing, same thing with Ethereum. Like that seems to be like the much more peaceful, much more viable, much more likely like path forward, rather than going and like, outright.
Well, it is a lot more likely.
Yeah.
It is definitely a lot more likely.
It's the water flows downhill like outcome. Like that's how I see this playing out.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that Bitcoin is like water. Can't stop it, and it's going to get everywhere. Yeah. And each of these individual, because these systems are backstopped by greed, you can't stop individuals from being greedy and then getting a huge bag and then now being incentivized. Like the first principles of like, you literally have to have skin in the game to care. And once you do, you care. Like underestimated. It's just so underestimated.
And if the state ever like banned Bitcoin so like the people couldn't get it, I'm still bet the state itself would put Bitcoin on its balance sheets. Probably. Like just because the state banned the people from having it didn't mean they banned themselves from having it, which means all the same incentives to own Bitcoin still exist. And if you are the state, there's no one banning you from buying it. And so you're still going to buy it. Like you're still going to buy Bitcoin and mine it.
Yeah.
Right.
Look at Venezuela.
Right. You're just like limiting your people from it instead. So which is a dumb choice.
Dumb choice. States are dumb. They do dumb things. Yeah. I mean, like, dude, I feel like Bitcoin and the greater crypto adoption is really going to start exposing malicious states, just like coronavirus is exposing malicious states. So,
yeah, it's a polarizing technology, right? Like, really makes you make it really forces you into a corner about like how you manage yourself as a nation, right? Like,
yeah, no,
how dominating do you want to be? Like, let's see it. So it's a big litmus test.
Yeah, litmus test is what I was going for. That's what I was looking for. What else were we going to talk about? Okay, so let's talk specifically about the StableACT. I have my opinions. We're actually covering it on Bitcoin Magazine in the next few days. What have been your impressions so far? And I think the StableACT is something that is very much not like a Bitcoin or Ethereum thing. It's very much a like freedom. It's a freedom thing. It's like, how invasive are we going to let these laws get?
So like, I need to look into the StableACT more because I can't totally speak on it. But also from what I understand, it might be the whole entire thing. And basically the StableACT is like anyone that interacts with a stablecoin or issues a stablecoin needs to be a bank or needs to have like a bank charter, which like one of the motivations for the act itself are to like not repeat the mistakes that banks have made with regards to like not serving the underserved population and like the poor. And so it's therefore making stablecoin issuers and people, and I think entities that accept stablecoins, and it makes them become a bank, which is fucking ridiculous. That those two things are not separate. Those are separate things. Like those are not related to each other. How the details as to how they plan to actually, or how they intend on like regulating stablecoins and stuff that go around on Ethereum, I don't know the details of that, but kind of, I think the answer might just be because like it's so harebrained anyways that it doesn't make sense at all. Like from what I gathered, like I said at the early part of this podcast, like if you extend the ethos of this law, we get like state approved like client updates for our ETH2 nodes, or like maybe issued straight from the government, because like somebody has to issue software that stops like USDC or DAI or Tether transactions going to specific wallets or contracts. And so there needs to be, it's basically asking to like whitelist or restrict economic activity, specific types of economic activity. And so like that is like, who's going to issue those updates? Like who's going to determine what's going to
banned? So just to jump in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
It started off with, hey, every stablecoin issuer must be a bank and must go through regulation if you're going to tether to the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was how it started. And then it went to, well, if there's an autonomous contract issuing dollars or stablecoins, like who's the counterparty? Who are you going to go after as the government? And then one of the writers and, the person who ended up, doing most of the debating on Twitter, Rowan Gray, who's a lawyer, thought leader, whatever, honestly, prick MMTer in my opinion, but that's just me. But, he says, well, there's always a counterparty. And then, we kind of followed that logic all the way to, okay, well, if there's truly no counterparty, then the nodes are the counterparty, and the people that are running the network are the counterparty.
Flow? Jesus.
That's how the logic flow went. Then the nodes are the counterparty. And hey, if you don't want to be held liable and you're a node, then you need to make sure that you're not processing any illegal transactions. So obviously this is a very, like, the people who wrote it intended to be that far ranging. Mm-hmm. Can it be feasibly can it be feasibly enforced? Absolutely not. We already know that it's a fact that it's not enforceable whatsoever. No. But the idea is that, hey, we don't care if this thing's decentralized. At some point, someone's going to be held liable, and we want to make sure that we can go after them if you're going to, do something that we find is illegal to the US.
So like if you as an Ethereum node operator processed a block that included a transaction that led to like drug trafficking or deaths or whatever, you are liable.
Or that had a dollar token that didn't have licensing.
It's like
we're not even talking about actually a crime with a victim. Right. These are also victimless crimes.
Right. So like to me, what's weird about this Rohan guy is like he both gets it, as in like understands how the networks are architected, but then he also doesn't get it. Like for some reason, he like no one who understands this industry, and maybe I'm the asshole, but no one who understands this industry thinks that you can censor a transaction. Like that's the whole point.
That's the whole point. David, he is a statist. He is an MMTer.
He's a big statist.
So actually, I researched him a lot because I researched MMT a lot for something that Bitcoin Magazine did in August. But
he's Australian, right?
I don't know his background.
I think he's Australian, which is funny because like Australia is becoming more and more statist by the day. But sorry,
it's incredibly statist place. But in general, like he believes in the power of the government. And he's actually very well read in cryptocurrency networks and stuff like that. Like he definitely fucks around with, crypto in terms of like is interested in it. But at the flip side, like he believes that there is lawfulness. He I feel like he would agree with Vlad Zamfir a lot. And
it feels like a Vlad conversation.
Yeah, like but he's a lawyer who acts like Vlad, and he instead of being a Ethereum developer, he's a lawyer, so you could tell what his initial disposition is.
Right. Yeah. Like,
and someone is asking, why doesn't the StableACT go after money transmitter parties like PayPal? First of all, PayPal is a bank now, so they would be okay. But yes, it does. It counts for any fintech, so it does not matter if it's a crypto stable token or if it's just a stable dollar thing inside of your servers and it's on your whatever your private, your private fintech app. It doesn't matter. It's extremely far ranging. Right. I mean, it will get challenged by a lot of money. There's going to be a lot of money that won't allow this to happen. But I mean, it just shows where regulators' heads are at.
Well, one thing it did was incentivize a lot of funding into the Gitcoin grants, the Coin Center Gitcoin grant, which they received. Like they're going to like receive $250,000 from the Ethereum community plus matching out of Gitcoin. So pretty proud, like the Ethereum community could step up and donate $250,000. It's pretty dope.
Yeah, Gitcoin is really awesome infrastructure, and the Bitcoin community is way behind in terms of that kind of infrastructure so far.
Just use Bitcoin. Just use Gitcoin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see how that trends, but I have a feeling that people will be using Gitcoin at some point.
The volume of money on Gitcoin has been up and to the right, like every single quarter. I think we're going to breach $1 million donated this quarter.
That's awesome. I mean, hey, I think that's a great project, and I enjoyed the interview that we did with Kevin, right?
Kevin Owaki, yeah, great guy.
So that was a good interview. We didn't get too into the BTC versus ETH in that one, but it was still a good one.
Yeah.
What else? But so like, let's just zoom out a little bit, because this is not like the StableACT in the grand scheme of things. It's not going to pass. Like it was written by
the fight.
It would, yeah, like, but it has the energy of the fight.
Yeah.
You know, this is the energy of the fight. Is we need to make sure we're banking everyone, and COVID hurt our citizens so much. And by regulating this stuff, it solves all the problems. Right. Oh, and by the way, there's this after effect where like 90 other things become, under our jurisdiction now. Right. That's the energy of the fight. Like that's what is in front of us. So like, as an Ethereum, what's your perspective on it? Because I think that this is going to be very important for ETH2 staking exchanges and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely riling up the Ethereum community. I mean, it's Ethereum specific legislation, so as it should. But I mean, I don't really have like I think you would expect my take. Like no one in the Ethereum world wants this or anything like it, right? And this is something that me and Ryan have been like chewing on in the back of our heads lately, because like we know this fight is coming, right? And so we're trying to like part of the mission of Bankless is to try and rally up an army of people so that when something like this comes, like we actually can like coalesce the energies of so many like separate people out in the ecosystem and get their attention on quote unquote the fight, right? That's kind of where our heads are at. And also we're also having Peter von Valkenburg, is that how you pronounce his last name, on the show tomorrow. You're muted. On the nailed it. Yeah, oh, nice, dope. So he's coming on the State of the Nation tomorrow. So we're going to chat about him, about like what do we need to do to protect this online nation.
It's actually kind of funny. We're covering the same thing on our respective platforms, but nice. Yeah, I think on Wednesday we're putting out a piece and an interview with Pierre Richard, who had an just unbelievable ratio on Twitter.
Dude, I've really been appreciating Pierre during this whole ordeal. Like when it's Bitcoin versus Ethereum, like Pierre's just like another annoying Bitcoiner. But like when we're actually like shoulder to shoulder fighting the same fight, I really enjoy having Pierre on my side.
Yeah, now his Twitter IQ is very high. Let's just say that.
That's a good description for sure.
But I retweeted it from yesterday. But essentially, Rowan says something like, crazy thought, but if you run a network that is responsible for illegal things, you might be held liable. Something along those lines.
Right. I know. Yep.
And then Pierre says, crazy thought. If you vote and pay taxes, does that mean you're liable for the incarceration and murder that happened in Iraq?
Yeah.
And then just like that tweet, I think the Rowan tweet had like 2 likes and like 90 comments. And then it was like the Pierre tweet had like 2,000 likes, like 400 retweets. It's just like, people are just like, dude, this is like, you are contradicting yourself, you asshole.
Right.
Like, there's no way that your standard can stand up to any sort of precedent. And then Pierre just like puts it like so clearly how ridiculous he truly was, and no response from Rowan. No response.
Oh, of course.
Like, how can you respond after that ratio? Like, that is the ratio of all ratios.
I'm sure he could. But like, if you get ratioed 4,000 to 2, like, you've already like you shut up. You stop talking. There's nothing more to say.
Yeah, I think you just mute it.
Yeah, that's
mute and move on.
Yeah, just put your tail between your legs and carry on.
But yeah, so we're gonna get some Pierre takes on this on Bitcoin Magazine. So I'm excited for that.
Nice.
So before I hit you with the hard questions about ETH2 and why I'm bullish on proof of work, it's been a week since, or a little less than a week since ETH2 beacon chain has been launched.
Mhm.
We've seen some, Beth tokens getting launched. We've seen a lot of money get put into ETH2 in general, and people are staking, and people are posting pictures of their staking computers and stuff like that. What's the overall sentiment on ETH2, and how are things going in general?
Yeah, people are really, really bullish. There's over 1% of all Ether which is currently staking, and kind of the mental models I've always given Ether for like the bull case of Ether is somewhere around like 12 to 18% staking. And that's like at complete maturity. So that's got to be in like a full cycle from now. So 4 to 5 years. But we're marching our way there. We're at 1%.
How do you come up with those numbers?
Well, because say it's 10%, right? Say 10% of Ether is staked, and the market cap of Ether right now is like 50 billion. And so that means 5% is being staked to the network. And so like all the tokens on Ethereum, there's got to be some sort of balance between the market cap of tokens on Ethereum and the market cap of the total amount of Ether being staked, right? So if there's 5 billion Ether being staked, we're generally okay with it being relatively top heavy. And so I think like somewhere between a 10 and 100 to 1 ratio of capital being staked at the base layer versus market cap of the actual chain, not including the rest of the Ether, is like the right ratio. So if we have 5 billion staked, then we can have 50 to 500 billion worth of value secured. And these are just gut numbers. These are just gut numbers. We actually did release a video with Vitalik on the Bankless post where we did talk, Bankless YouTube, where we did talk about this. So like there's a ratio of how much security needs to be staked versus how much the chain is actually worth. And then there's the question of like, okay, so if 10, let's say call it 15. If 15% of Ether is staked, that means an attacker needs another 15 plus 1% of Ether. Right. And that means that's 30% total Ether. And like if we also have like 20% of Ether, 20 to 30% of Ether, stuck in DeFi, and the remainder is kind of just loose, accessing an equal amount of 15% seems like really impossible. And so that number could probably all the way go down to like 10%. If 10% is staked, then accessing 10% more total Ether, it would be really, really hard. That's how we come
on Coinbase.
Okay, that's different.
So no, but it's not, because that's the attack vector.
Well, no, because then we do
exchanges offer incentives to stake there, and then that's where you get the 20%.
Right. Okay, but then we get into just the how proof of stake is partially secured by the social layer, right? And so if somebody does something wrong with their stake, we just fork away their
weak subjectivity.
Yes. But there's insane incentive to not do this.
It's like if there's no weak subjectivity, then proof of stake is all peachy.
But there's nothing wrong with weak subjectivity. Why?
I don't
why
know.
Why would there be anything wrong with that? Like I have never been like
pretty nasty.
Coming onto this show and talking about proof of stake and how like weak subjectivity is weak. Like I can never figure out like what their arguments are.
Well, because you could argue that we already live in a world with weak subjectivity. What the true revolution is, we have systems that are based on everyone kind of agreeing, and like they can be malleable and they can be influenced and they can be shifted. And what Bitcoin offers is straight hard objectivity. It's like impossibly and like unchangeably objective. It's like there's zero subjectivity whatsoever. So like, I'm not to even say that weak subjectivity can't work. It's just I don't think it's going to be as valuable.
It's not even that weak. It's like the only thing that's weak is like it's not weak if Coinbase has a bunch of supply and starts like being malicious.
Wait,
that's not weak. It's how to route around Coinbase that's the weak subjectivity part. Like it's not objective as to whether Coinbase is.
The terminology is weak subjectivity, but I guess what I'm saying is that is what we don't like is that there is any subjectivity at all, because it is when you are being like attacked, it's not always obvious what is the attack. And that is where the weak subjectivity breaks down, because you have to coordinate on consensus on what is the attack. And that is, you can't always assume that that's going to be obvious. You can't assume that knowing what the attack is going to be obvious.
Yes, if it comes down to like whether a transaction is getting included or not, like that, it's not up for debate. If Coinbase is doing something that is atypical from the rest of the clients, that is obvious. That is obvious. And so like one of the reasons that why like Bitcoiners arguing about this is so frustrating is like, first off, like it's the threat that keeps this from being a thing in the first place, right? Like just the mere existence of this as a security mechanism means that Coinbase will never ever do anything malicious, because we will delete all of their ether, right? That's the thing that prevents this from ever getting there.
Like that's the thing is like, I don't think that just deleting Coinbase's ether is that easy. If it comes down to it, there's going to be a fork and there's going to be a lot of economic power.
Yeah,
that won't delete Coinbase's ether.
I just don't care to entertain like these like edge case what ifs. Like these, it's not going to happen.
They're not even that edge case.
Yes,
look at the StableACT. They will want to decide what software you want run, and they will try to find accountability or liability.
Which is which? Like, no, I don't want to run software that censors transactions. Like, this is not a hard thing.
Again, that's why, I think that proof of work is necessary. And look, Ethereum has Bitcoin. Ethereum can always trade against Bitcoin. Like, we don't need to have multiple things that are exactly the same. So maybe Ethereum just doesn't need it and it doesn't matter. And Ethereum is going to make it through, because in reality, Ethereum is in a world with Bitcoin. But I'm just saying that there's a lot of confusion out there that, hey, proof of stake with weak subjectivity is just as good with, none of the trade-offs as proof of work. And it's just different. And proof of work, there's no subjectivity at all. It's the longest chain, and that's it.
Sure.
Especially if there's no hard forks.
If the thing is, like, at the end of the day, if it works, it works, right? So that's going to be the thing that determines what platform people adopt. Like, does it work or does it not work?
Yeah. I mean, and people will adopt broken financial systems, but at the end of the day, like, there is a drive for better money, and that's what Bitcoin offers. So, I mean, I don't know if the powers that be are going to be strong enough to take down the Ethereum network, but I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily know. Like, I feel like the fact that there is something that we know for a fact that they can't take down, like, at least that's there. At least that's the backstop. That's the true risk-free, that's the true risk-freeness. I think like Bitcoin is risk-free crypto, and then all the other cryptos are some derivative of like risk to reward layer on top of it.
Right. And one of many Vitalik's pieces was about like, well, how do you give up the minimum amount of like trust or risk or whatever, and then reach like complete, what he called escape velocity, which is just like, and then also get everything else that you want. Like, you give up a little bit, but then you gain so much in a different direction. And that's like the trade-off that Ethereum has made. Like, we have committed to weak subjectivity, which in our opinion is just like not that big of a deal. And then we get everything else. We get like lower issuance. We get tighter security. We get flexibility with issuance, with fee burn. We get smart contracts. We get internal reasons and internal safety in our own internal ecosystem. Like, and all of that came out of just moving an inch away from just like whatever you want to call Bitcoin to proof of stake.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if that's good enough.
Well, now we're finally staking. And so at the very beginning of this podcast, I'm pretty sure it was the opinions of you and other Bitcoiners that came on that will never get to this point. So we are continuing the march forward.
Yep. So is Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that in this idea of like, what can we compromise on in order to get everything else? I would say that, I mean, there's a great way that you can align Bitcoin with that narrative as well is that, okay, Bitcoin may have compromised on-chain expressivity, but what it didn't compromise on is just complete objectiveness, complete trustlessness. And then from there, you've established a unit that can be used on any other platform and leveraged. And I mean, that's kind of like, the similar narrative, one trade-off in order to get the world, the trade-off of expressivity is kind of gained by now you kind of just have this incorruptible unit.
Yeah, but by that same vein, like that unit doesn't need to like be as big as the whole world, right? Like, or that unit doesn't need to, the ratio of the market cap of Bitcoin or using a Bitcoin as a unit or any other Bitcoin unit, like, for example, you can measure bigger things with smaller units, right? Like I am 6 feet tall, like we can, and so that's 6 units, right? And so like the market cap of Bitcoin doesn't need to be large for that unit to be expressed regardless, right? And so the trust-free risk-free rate of the Bitcoin unit can be stacked up to measure anything, and that thing can be bigger than itself.
I mean, yes-ish, but money ultimately is half of every transaction. If money is if the thing is denominated in that money, like there are more yuan units out there than there are dollar units. But if you look at contracts denomination, it's 98% dollar denomination. I think in terms of total units out there in the world, like dollars are like 20% of them. But in terms of economic relevance, it's like 100%.
Sure. I think we've gone in a little spiral here. Should we wrap this up?
I mean, I'm just bringing up an example of like, okay, I mean, sure, that doesn't. I guess what you're trying to say is that Ethereum can still be bigger than Bitcoin.
Yes. Yes.
And Bitcoin's still like the world money. Sure.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel
I
like
don't really think Ether's money. And we've talked about this. Like the whole planting the flag from the Ethereum community, like, oh, ETH is money. It's like, no, what they meant to say, what they're saying is like Ether is valuable. Ether as a transactional currency is like not going to happen. It's going to happen with some high velocity token on Ethereum. In the same way, like Bitcoin is like the low velocity token to the world, Ether is the low velocity token of like the Ethereum ecosystem. And the overall ecosystem is going to be really, really big. And it's probably going to be bigger than Bitcoin. Because it enabled it via expressivity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe the apps will. I feel like Bitcoin's just the sound money app. So
yeah,
with that, it has a massive TAM.
Totally. And it can be expressed on Ethereum. Sure.
Yeah, but the sound money app, the app layer, so that's where I think is the value capture is going to be. It's going to be on Ethereum. It's going to be on it's going to be on many other platforms as well. All right, let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
All right. You guys can follow the podcast at POV Crypto. You can follow me at Trustless Date, both on Twitter and on Bankless. Christian.
Yep, you can follow me at CK_Snarks. You can find me you can find the show at POV Crypto. You can find me at Bitcoin Magazine. And have a great one. Peace.